What if the biggest thing standing between you and the life you want isn't a lack of talent, intelligence, or opportunity? What if it's simply the habit of saying, I'll do it later? Welcome back to Winning Habits, where we explore the habits, decisions, and mindset shifts that can transform an ordinary life into an extraordinary one. Today, let me tell you a story about a young man who had big dreams, but one problem that kept getting in his way. He wanted to build a successful career, become financially independent, and create something he could truly be proud of. He had the ideas, he had the ability, he even had a notebook filled with carefully written plans. But there was one problem. He was always waiting for tomorrow. Every morning, he told himself he would start working on his goals after breakfast. After breakfast, he decided he would start after lunch. After lunch, he felt tired, so he promised himself he would begin in the evening. And when evening arrived, his phone suddenly became much more interesting than his dreams. Just 5 minutes, he would say. 5 minutes became 30. 30 became an hour. Then it was bedtime. He would close his notebook and tell himself, tomorrow I'll finally get serious. The strange thing was that he wasn't lazy. He genuinely wanted to succeed. He watched motivational videos. He made schedules. He downloaded productivity apps. He bought new notebooks whenever he felt ready for a fresh start. But somehow, nothing changed. One Monday morning, an important opportunity finally appeared. His manager asked him to prepare a presentation for the following week. It was exactly the kind of opportunity he had been waiting for. He went home excited and opened his laptop. But instead of starting, he looked at the calendar and thought, I have plenty of time. Tuesday passed. Wednesday passed. Thursday passed. Friday evening arrived. He finally opened the presentation. The screen was completely empty. He stared at it for several seconds. Then something became clear. The hardest part wasn't doing the work. The hardest part was starting. He realized he had been making the same mistake over and over again. He kept waiting to feel ready. He kept waiting to feel motivated. He kept waiting for the perfect moment. But the perfect moment never came. That night, he closed his laptop and made himself a simple promise. Tomorrow, he wouldn't try to finish everything. He would simply start. He didn't know it yet, but that tiny decision was about to change the way he approached his goals, his work, and eventually, his entire life. The next morning, he sat down at his desk. The presentation was still unfinished. He could already feel the familiar urge to reach for his phone. His hand moved toward it. Then he stopped. He remembered the promise he had made the night before. He didn't need to finish everything. He didn't even need to feel motivated. He only needed to start. So he opened his laptop and told himself just 5 minutes. 5 minutes didn't sound difficult. He wrote the first sentence, then another. He continued working. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 20. Before he realized it, almost an hour had gone by, and something unexpected had happened. He wanted to continue. The work hadn't suddenly become easy. He had simply overcome the hardest part, starting. For years, he had believed that motivation came first and action came second. Now he was discovering that it often worked the other way around. Action created motivation. The next day, he used the same approach. Instead of telling himself, I have to finish this entire project, he said, I'll just work on it for 5 minutes. Instead of thinking about an hour-long workout, he told himself, I'll just put on my shoes and walk outside. Instead of thinking about reading an entire book, he said, I'll read one page. The tasks hadn't changed. His way of approaching them had. Slowly, his days began to change. He started putting his phone away whenever he needed to concentrate. He stopped creating enormous lists filled with 20 different tasks. Instead, he chose one important thing and started with that. Whenever his mind said, do it later, he answered, just start for 5 minutes. It wasn't perfect. There were still days when he procrastinated. There were still moments when distractions won. But now, he understood something important. One bad day didn't have to become a bad week. If he wasted the morning, he didn't have to waste the entire day. He could simply begin again. A few weeks later, the presentation was finally complete. He walked into the meeting feeling prepared instead of terrified. He delivered the presentation confidently. His manager was impressed. But the presentation wasn't the biggest victory. The biggest victory was what he had learned about himself. He realized that procrastination wasn't always about being lazy. Sometimes we procrastinate because a task feels too difficult. Sometimes it feels boring. Sometimes we're afraid we'll fail. And sometimes the goal is so big that we don't even know where to begin. So we escape. We check our phones. We watch another video. We organize things that don't really need organizing. We tell ourselves we'll start tomorrow, but tomorrow usually brings the same task. And the longer we wait, the heavier it feels. He finally understood that he didn't need to eliminate every uncomfortable feeling. He simply needed to learn how to act despite them. Months passed, and slowly he became a different person. Not because he suddenly became perfectly disciplined, not because he never procrastinated again, and not because every morning became easy. He still had days when he felt tired. He still had moments when he wanted to put things off, but now he knew what to do. Instead of asking, "Do I feel like doing this?" he asked, "What is the smallest action I can take right now?" That question changed everything. When he wanted to exercise, he put on his shoes. When he needed to study, he opened the book. When he had an important project, he opened the document. When fear told him to wait, he took one small step forward. He discovered that you don't defeat procrastination by becoming a completely different person overnight. You defeat it by becoming someone who starts one small action, then another, then another. Eventually, starting becomes normal. Think about your own life for a moment. How many things have you been saying you'll do someday? Maybe it's the business idea you've been thinking about. Maybe it's the book you want to write. Maybe it's a skill you've always wanted to learn. Maybe it's getting into better shape. Maybe it's an important conversation you've been avoiding. How many times have you told yourself, "I'll start tomorrow"? Tomorrow sounds harmless, but if you keep giving everything to tomorrow, one day you'll look back and realize that years have passed. You don't need another motivational video. You don't need another perfect plan. You don't need to wait until you suddenly feel ready. You need to start. Make the tasks smaller. If you can't work for an hour, work for 5 minutes. If you can't read an entire chapter, read one page. If you can't finish the entire project, write the first sentence. If you can't change your entire life today, change one decision. Because action creates momentum, and momentum makes the next step easier. You don't have to become perfectly disciplined today. You simply need to stop giving tomorrow everything that belongs to today. Your future is being built by what you choose to do right now. So if there's something you've been postponing, don't close this video and tell yourself you'll do it later. Start now, even if it's only for 5 minutes. And remember, 5 minutes may seem insignificant, but 5 minutes repeated every day can become hours. Hours can become skills. Skills can become opportunities. And opportunities can change your life. If this story helped you, make sure to like this video and subscribe to Winning Habits for more stories about discipline, mindset, and personal growth. And before you leave, I want you to interact with this video. Go down to the comments and tell me, what is the one thing you've been procrastinating on that you're going to start today? Write it down. Make the decision real. Then take the first step. Because sometimes changing your life doesn't begin with a huge decision. It begins with 5 minutes of action.